Hi there guys. In this video we're going to have a look at some 8mm Mauser or 7.92 by 57mm Mauser surplus ammo. This stuff is dated 1951 and it was made in Czechoslovakia. I've had it since about 1987, so I've owned it a long time. In fact, I've owned it longer now than it was old when I bought it, so that's one function of getting older in life. Anyway, this stuff is Berdan primed. It is highly corrosively primed, I might add, and brass cased. You can see we've got a magnet here, and a magnet does not stick to the cartridge case. As you can see, it certainly sticks to the bullet. So these projectiles are 178, nominally 178 grains, steel core. It's got a mild steel core or iron core. Boat-tailed, and basically this is just standard German World War II pattern SMK style ammunition. So during the war, of course, the Germans took over the Czechoslovakian arms industry, and the Czech factories produced German pattern small arms and ammunition, and this is an example of that. After the war was over, they continued to make that wartime pattern ammunition. So to conserve on strategic materials like lead, the Germans come up with a couple of variations of steel or iron cored projectiles, and this one is the SME pattern of projectile. So basically an iron core with a little thin strip of lead on each side of it, and then a steel jacket which has been plated with brass or copper as kind of a lubricant and a bit of a rust preventative. So this stuff has held up externally quite well. It's been stored in good storage conditions since I've had it. So you can see the cases are still nice and shiny. They are not a highly polished case. They never were. The stuff looked this way right from the factory. You can see it's a little bit marbly in its finish, but that's the way it was when we got it back in the day. So it comes in these cardboard boxes, kind of a pasteboard box with 15 rounds per box. Interestingly, the importer appears to have pulled off part of the packaging so they could examine each individual box, because some of the boxes that were in the cartons or the crate did not match the other boxes. So I suspect when this stuff came in, there was probably some tracer or something that was mixed in with every crate, and the importer went through and pulled all that out and then substituted boxes of other similar but not identical ammo to make up a full crate. So we got nothing but straight ball ammo, no interesting stuff. There's the stamp on there. Of course, this is for sale in Canada, so it's got an English and French stamp on it there, and made in Czechoslovakia. 15 rounds. This was brought into the country by Century International Arms in Montreal. They also operate out of the United States, out of is it St. Albans, Vermont, I believe they have their outfit there. Anyway, so let's have a look at what these are made up of. So I pulled apart 10 rounds, and let's first off have a look at the projectiles. So as I mentioned, these are steel core and steel jacketed, so a magnet will stick to absolutely excuse me, any part of these. You can see the steel core poking out the base there. And you'll notice that the jacket material is starting to discolor a bit, which is an example of what happens when the powder begins to deteriorate. It gives off kind of an acidic fumes or gases, and it does start to tarnish or corrode both the inside of the cartridge cases and the bullets. So I know there was one of these bullets which actually, there's one there, has some more pronounced corrosion. You can see the red there, so pretty good proof that this is actually a iron or steel core in these bullets. I didn't bother going to the process of cutting these apart and sectioning them. It's just not something I could be bothered with. Anyway, so there's what the bullets look like. We'll get the calipers out here and we'll measure them up. They are a little bit smaller, excuse me, they're a little bit smaller than you would expect for For an 8mm Mauser bullet, you can see there's in one dimension 321. You would expect with a commercial bullet 323, so these are not 100% round either. So 321, 322, depending upon which bullet you grab and measure and where you measure it. These were not pulled with a press-mounted puller, so the dimensions should not have been changed any. These were pulled apart with an impact puller, so that shouldn't have hurt them any in that regard. So there you go, 322, so a little touch smaller than a commercial style of bullet. Military ammo is sometimes loaded with slightly smaller bullets to keep pressures down. They often have to deal with vast quantities of ammo and, you know, issues with production equipment and machinery and labor and all that stuff. So I think they tend to, back in those days, they tended to load them slightly smaller, which was easier to get away with for pressure problems than having a bullet that was too big in diameter. So there's the length of the bullet. So it's a fairly long one because of the iron or steel core. If this was a bullet that was made out of with a lead core, it could be quite a bit shorter. I don't know what the ballistic coefficient would be on a bullet like this. Because of that rather light core material, it's probably not as good as it would look like. If this was a lead core bullet, you would assume it would have a pretty high BC with that kind of a tapered profile and boat tail. So anyway, that's what the bullets themselves look like. Let's have a look at the measurements. I pulled, like I said, I pulled 10 of these apart, and we weighed the bullets. So here are the bullet weights, the individual bullet weights, and we have an average of 178.2 grains, which is spot on for the what the SME bullet should weigh. Extreme spread of 1.9 and a standard deviation of 0.7, so that's not astounding. It's kind of what you'd expect for mass production military type ammo. So you can see there's the lowest weight one, 177.4, and the highest 179.3. So no surprises there. It is kind of what one would expect. So let's move over from the actual bullet itself, and we'll have a look at the powder charges. So these were, once again, 10 were pulled apart and weighed. So we'll have a look at the individual charge out of one of these. Make sure we got all the powder out of it. This is something that can kind of happen with old ammo. The powder can start to stick to the inside, especially if the powder starts to break down a little bit. So you have to give them a few taps to make sure you get all the kernels of powder out. This is an extruded style powder. I do not know if it's a single or a double base powder. It's kind of an IMR looking extruded stick powder. And like I said, I think it's starting to break down slightly. It's not bad. It doesn't really smell awful, but it's leaving a little bit of corrosion on the inside of the cartridge cases and on the ends of the bullets, so I'm going to have to assume that the stuff is starting to break down. Have a look at the individual powder charges here. So we weighed 10 of them. Excuse me. We've got 44.1 as the low and 45 as the high. Average 44.7, extreme spread of 0.9, standard deviation of 0.3. So that's pretty good for a stick type powder in mass production military ammo. That's quite a reasonable spread for the powder charges. So nothing, once again, nothing really shocking there. I'm going to go back. We're going to have another look at the head stamp here, since I didn't really spend much time showing you that so far. And there's how I've kind of annotated it on my notes. That hard to pronounce for me name down below is the name of the factory which manufactured this stuff. It used to be located in Czechoslovakia, but when Czechoslovakia broke up, it is now located in the Slovak portion of that country. They apparently, after the war, continued to make some ammo, and they also manufactured motorcycles and mopeds, so that's a bit of an interesting thing. The head stamp on this stuff for years had me a little bit stumped until the arrival of the internet let me do easier and better research. You can see there that it says 51, which is the year of production. I'm assuming the 5 stands for the month of production, but I'm not entirely sure about that. The X is the maker's mark for that company that we just looked at. That apparently was their... I think the Germans probably set them up using that production code, and after the war they just left it alone. The star on there for many years I thought was just... perhaps the stuff had been made for Israel because Israel used 8mm Mauser rifles. However, more reading has indicated that the star on these is just an indication that the cartridge cases are made of brass, because they actually did make lots and lots of 8mm Mauser with steel cases, and to denote brass cased ammo they put that star on there. So it apparently has absolutely nothing to do with Israel whatsoever. And we've got our Berdan primer there, which is highly corrosive. Some people say that corrosive is corrosive, but there's degrees of corrosive, and this stuff is just about as bad as you could come by. You don't want to waste any time after you fire this stuff in properly cleaning the barrel with a water-based cleaner, hopefully of some kind that will dissolve the corrosive priming salts, because if you leave this for more than a few hours you're going to have rust in your barrel. You can also see we've got some staking points around the primer to keep it in place, because this stuff would have been used in either rifles or machine guns, so you need that kind of a staking to make sure that the primers stay put and don't migrate during a very vicious cycle in most of those belt-fed machine guns. You can just imagine an MG42 spitting these things out at over 1200 RPM. You want everything firmly put together. So speaking of firmly put together, you can barely see it, but there is a crimp applied to this bullet. You can see on the bullet itself there's a cantilever there that the cartridge case is crimped into. So if you want to replicate this kind of a thing, if you pull this ammo apart and you want to put it back together, the Lee factory crimp dies are a great way to accomplish that. So you can see that the way this was seated, the base of the boat tail is down into the powder chamber a little bit there. So these are pretty much, there's as much powder in these basically as they could get, is what it amounts to. So the overall length of these cartridges, let's have a look at that since we've got the calipers out here. So there's a tip to base measurement of this particular cartridge, 3.1605 inches for the overall cartridge length. So like I said, a brass case, but a very steel and steel core bullet. Speaking of the cartridge case, I'm not sure how well this will show up, but we'll put some extra light on it there. You can see that there's some sort of discoloration inside the case, where there's a little bit of green verdigris, or whatever you want to call it, corrosion. It's really hard to show on these videos to get an angle where I can get light down inside there, but you'll have to take my word for it. The inside of these cartridge cases are starting to discolor and tarnish, which once again is an indication that the powder is starting to break down. And all of them went off, the ones that I tried to fire, but I don't know for how much longer the primers will continue to be good. This ammo's getting to be pretty old stuff. Anywho, so that's the cartridge case, which by the way weighs 169 grains. I think I weighed one of them just to see what it weighed. Alright guys, well I'd like to thank you for hanging around and watching this video right through to the end. As usual, your comments and ratings are appreciated, and for those of you who may not be subscribed, I would invite you to subscribe to the channel. It doesn't cost you anything. And until the next one, thanks for watching, and have a great one.